The next speaker that we have with us is again somebody who's a doyen in the field of industry. He's done a Bachelor in Physics, then went to IIT for engineering, and then I think the common theme is many of them have studied at Harvard. Then he went to Harvard Business School. He has been the executive director of the holding company of the Tata Group, that is Tata Sons. So all the things that you enjoy in the Tata IPL, all the things that you enjoy about the Tata Group, the holding company of that, he's been an executive director there. He's been the chairman of the board of directors for Castrol. He's been the chairman of Unilever Arabia. He's on numerous boards. He's the man who's advised everyone from Ratan Tata to people who are on this list and beyond. It gives me great pleasure to be able to welcome somebody who's authored 18 books. That's more than the books some of us have read. And he's somebody who's taken out time, flown down specifically for this, and the fact that I admire most about him is the fact that he believes in an inclusive, democratic, pluralistic idea of India. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please put your hands together for our Gopalakrishnan. Let me start, sir, by asking you, sir, in a world of changing hobbies and passions, you've been in the corporate world for now 55 years, and you've held many distinguished positions across. You've stuck to one thing, whilst most of us grapple with deciding what to do in life. It's very difficult for us to stick to one thing, even for the likes of those who are millennials, and for most of my friends, I see them struggle with the fact that they need to pursue one thing forever. What is your advice to young people? Should you choose one thing, or is it okay to dabble in multiple things at the same time?
Well, first of all, thank you, Chairman. It's a great pleasure to be here. And you are contributing to my agenda, because my agenda is every year I must talk to 10,000 people face to face, young people. So today I can put up the meter or 500 log aage usme. And every year I try to talk to 100,000 people through my social media. So I thank you for having me here. मेरे पास और कोई काम नहीं है, बच्चों के साथ बात करना ही मेरा काम है. Coming to your question, you know, it's not this or that. It is this and that. You have to find what gives you pleasure. Because if you think of a job or starting a business or becoming a musician or whatever, it is not that you tried Hindustani music, Carnatic music, etc. It is what gives you fulfillment. And I think of this world as the sky. The sky has 8 billion slots of different shapes. And we are 8 billion human beings. All of us in this room, plus another so many billion. And we are all Brahman kar rahe hain, we are all ghum rahe hain wahan pe, trying to find a slot which fits our shape and size. So there is no right or wrong. I have not stuck to one job. I have changed 2 jobs. But I have stuck to one wife. And I'm not unhappy about it. If I have to, I'm not going to offer you advice. But you have to work hard at sticking with the thing that gives you fulfillment. And I think I've had my own journey of doubts. But then God has been kind. I'm not unhappy at my age. Have I answered your question? I cannot do only one thing. Some of you will do. I did engineering. And I joined the computer department. But I was a bit ahead of my time in 1967. So after 5 years, my company said, would you like to go into marketing? In those days, there was no I.I.M. So I switched to marketing. So one thing took me another way. घूम घूम के आते हैं. It looks like a straight line today after 55 years, but it's not a straight line.
So it's always a curve, which eventually becomes a straight line, is what you're saying. So it is okay for one to dabble in many things before finding your passion and your calling.
देखो भाई, we all live in Bombay, na? Everybody here. In the monsoon time, you get flies coming into your house. Anybody without a fly in his house in the monsoon time? Nobody. And how do you keep the fly away from disturbing you? You open your window in the morning, flies come and they go around. So we keep a fly swatter. In the same way, when we try to hit the fly with a straight line, you go quickly, the fly runs away. Life is like that. You go round and round a bit, and the fly does this. You know why the fly goes around in circles? It doesn't go in a straight line. If I want to go to Rishabh, I can turn my eyes, see you, and walk towards you. A fly can't do that. You know why? Anybody here studies biology? At least a few people at the back. And you might have studied this, otherwise tell your friends. A fly has 4,000 eyes. 4,000 इतनी सी है. ये पूरा आँख है, यहाँ भी पूरा आँख है. So each eye is looking somewhere else. So Rishabh is a very blurred person. तो वो घूम घूम के आपके पास आता है. Right? In physics, you can draw the spiral where the fly is able to get to you. And that's how life is also. Because we all have two eyes physically, but the mind is 4,000 eyes. हमको ये भी करना है, वो भी करना है, क्रिकेटर भी बनना है, भरतनाट्यम भी करना है. But then, at this age, it's wonderful, in my view, to experiment and try, especially if you're in a family where you're not required to work day after tomorrow. And find your own awqat. हर एक की अपनी अपनी औकात होती है. And you find your own awqat.
Very true. Very well said. One must find their own awqat. Right. So, there are many people who are aspiring to start their own business. There will be many who will start their own business in due course of time. You have advised, you have led many businesses. Today it's the day and age of Shark Tank, and it is the day and age of valuation versus value creation. I personally think that there is a small difference between the two.
Big difference.
But I would like to learn more from you the difference between sharks in tanks and then there are whales in oceans, as I call them. And you, sir, have been a whale in the ocean. But to a 17-year-old who is starting out afresh, who does not come from lineage, who does not come from privilege, it's all well and good to say that pay attention to value creation. But for the person in question, valuation would also perhaps be as important. Or do you think that the aim should be value creation over valuation? What is your advice to a 16 or a 17-year-old who wants to start out in the field of business?
Well, firstly, we are very fortunate in our country that we have an environment in the last 20 years has gradually improved. An environment where young people can get finance, get advice. There are associations and bodies that teach you how to be an entrepreneur. So, I'm glad you asked this question. I always hesitate to tell young people कि तुमको ऐसा करना चाहिए, वैसा करना चाहिए. But I can tell you from my experience that nothing in life is achieved without commitment to values. And if you're starting, India desperately needs enterprise. By the way, I think one of our shortcomings, I will not call it failing, since independence, it is not a question of this party or that party, I am not talking politics here, is we have failed to create an enterprise-friendly culture. Every government has said, I have created it, but that's not true. An enterprise-friendly culture expects to assign a role to enterprise. So the first lesson I have learned, which I would like to share with you, is why are you starting a company? You must start a company when you have some some intention of how to serve humanity. if you don't have enough enterprise in this country, you will not generate the taxes. If you don't generate the taxes, you will not have the money to spend on educational institutions, social, cultural, and then you go into takes. That's been one of during my life, my observations. So when you start an enterprise, think of why you want to start an enterprise. I call this niyat. What is your niyat? Why are you? Is it just to just start another bottle banana here, both bottle le rahe hain, chalo hum bhi bottle bana lete. Then you will get into this valuation chakra. The second thing that I would say early on, you have to do an enterprise, is to set up niti. What is the way of behavior? Insaniyat hona chahiye. Many people think they are founders and they are chasing valuation. And then you see in the newspaper some of the stories. That's not the way to do enterprise. If you have good niyat, you have good niti, then you must have good niyam. So I call this the 3N formula. आप लोग बच्चे हो तो this N 3N formula, 4P formula आप लोगों को पसंद होगा. If you don't have, just like if you're raising a child in a family, you can't say, oh यार बाद दिखा देंगे views. Doesn't work. Right from the time the child is a baby, the mother and the father and the uncle and grandfather will invest time in imparting values. They may not be perfectly successful, but they will teach them the values of truth, honesty. They may become big and do something else. That's a separate matter. But I'm saying that the parents try to do that. And you must treat your enterprise, if you're a startup, like a baby. Treat it with the same niyat, niti and niyam. In which case, answering your question, you must look for value to the other people who have given you money, whom you're employing. This includes I.I.M.U.N, your own institution, you know. All these people meaning you have volunteers, you have 3 mentors. You have to treat them with inayat, ibadat and insaniyat, if I might put it a different way. If you don't treat human beings with inayat, I hope all of you understand the word inayat. Inayat means kindly, with grace. Ibadat means something similar, and insaniyat means fairly, you know. And these are the things that young people are not taught. Enterprise is seen as a money machine. And our public vatavaran is a bit like that. But since you asked me, I would like to share with you that I have worked for 2 companies where right from the time I joined, long time ago, 55 years ago, I was only 21, 22 at that time, they taught me these without using these words. I hope all of you will become entrepreneurs, but entrepreneur puts a big responsibility on you to do these things that I've just said. Think of creating value, not valuation. Whereas everybody is obsessed with valuation. पैसे कैसे कमाना है? कमाइए, but सर्फ का एडवर्टाइजिंग में होता है ना, धो डालो मगर प्यार से. पैसा कमाओ मगर प्यार से, इनायत से.
No, very right, very well articulated, well said, sir. But this kind of thought, sir, comes from the 5 people that surround you. I've always believed that the 5 people who are around you will essentially, the sum total of those people is who you will become. So you grew up with role models and with people around you for inspiration who are differently, who are different both in terms of thought and action from the ones that necessarily surround us today. I was just explaining, saying that we are more accustomed to T20 in comparison to Test cricket, and there's nothing wrong between choosing one over the other. But sir, the environment that we place ourselves in, essentially we become the sum total of that environment, is what I believe. So is this belief correct? And if it is, sir, then how large a role does educational institutions and your friend circle play in shaping who you become in the future?
You know, you're almost, the way you're framing your question gives the impression that you're a Katputri. You are put into one Vatavaran and everything is shaping you. But you are also shaping that. So I think it's very important to notice the type of interaction you are having with your environment. My greatest inspiration and influence has not been some famous man. If you ask me, I won't say Mahatma Gandhi. I never met him. Even if I meet him, it will be for 5 minutes. Though Gandhiji died soon after I was born, though the two events are not related. I think you get inspiration from big leaders. Gandhiji, Abraham Lincoln, Vallabhbhai Patel. But you get instruction from your father, your mother, your uncle, your grandfather. So I have found that whereas I used to look for inspiration by reading big people, and that's a good thing to do, I'm not against it, you will never get instruction from that. Instruction you get by observing your father, your brother, your sister, your uncle. And an occasion like this. What is good about this is you're exposed to a number of people whom you didn't know before you walked in here this morning. And I think you have to be influenced both by inspiration and instruction. So, yes, times are changing. My grandfather used to live in the village, as probably many of you, or your great-grandfathers, I'm talking to a younger age group. But when he first saw a steam engine, when he was a young boy, he told me, he said, "Qayamat aa gayi hai." It took 8 days to go from our village to Madras city. It was called Madras at that time, not Chennai. For those of you who don't know that is. Now he's saying this train will take you in 8 hours. Then of course in my father's generation, he said, why 8 hours? I'll go in 1 hour. Because there's an aeroplane. In that sense, there's a T20, there's a test cricket. One of these days you get a T5, tennis ball cricket bhi aa gaya aajkal, which your generation will disapprove of. वातावरण बदलता जा रहा है, हम भी उसमें अडैप्ट होते जा रहे हैं. The beauty is, human beings are very adaptable. What you should be looking for is, am I adaptable? Adaptable doesn't mean कि रंग बदलते रहो. एक दिन डॉक्टर बन गया, एक दिन साइकोलॉजिस्ट बन गया, एक दिन क्रिकेटर बन गया. That's not what I mean by adaptable. Whatever you're good at. So I studied electronics engineering. I started as a computer engineer when there was no computer. I mean, there were 2 computers in India. And I had to adapt in a company which said, if you don't touch the sweating shoulders of the people who work in this company's factories and sales, marketing, you cannot become their leader. मुझे धक्का लगा. मैं तो IIT से आया था. मैं कुछ super intelligent बंदा था. So they sent me off to work as a salesman. Where? In Nagpur, Igatpuri, Shirdi. And there was no van in those days. This van and all has come just now. एक बैलगाड़ी लेके जाते थे. उसमें डालडा, साबुन वगैरह. And you spend your whole day talking to retailers. And you say, Agarwal ji, आज क्या लेंगे? 10 पेटी लेंगे. People thought this is a lousy job to do. But I learned more from those Agarwal jis about business than I would have learned from many books. Because Agarwal ji is doing the real stuff. You know? कहाँ से पैसे आते हैं, कहाँ से जाते हैं, he keeps track of it. So my suggestion is, look for inspiration from famous people, look for instruction from people who are close to you, and see what you can learn from any person. Even Agarwal ji could teach me something. And I am very respectful of that. I can tell you many stories of what the Agarwal... I'm using Agarwal ji, please don't mistake me if there's an Agarwal sitting in this group. I'm using it as a mnemonic for a trader or a retailer. I'm not saying this in any bad way. But there are many stories that I've learned.
And one can learn from everyone and everything. And that is something that people like you are living examples of. That you before you there was Mukesh Batra, and he also continued to say the same thing. And he said that one should continue to learn at every point in time in life. So
actually, I think that is Mukesh Batra, no? Yeah. He's there. Everything in life, there is something to learn from. But the rules of life are very simple. From your Bap Dada's time, your ancestors' time, 3, 4, 5, 10 commandments, Bible mein. कब से मोसेस के समय से आता है. Has anybody today taught you that covet other people's wives? That doesn't prevent you from doing it. That's a separate matter. But the rules are clear. It's दूसरे का चोरी नहीं करना. Treat other people well. You look at the Vedanta. The rules are very simple. Swami Vivekananda said this in interpreting Vedanta to American audiences back in 1893. When they asked him, "Sir, we are all a commercial Vatavaran in America. Don't talk to us in mysterious Vedantic terms. Tell us in simple way what we should do to run a good business." आपने भी पूछा था थोड़ी देर पहले. He said, do only 4 things. Now look at the brilliance. Number 1, become self-aware. Because you are your greatest enemy. आपका कोई शत्रु नहीं है, आप खुद शत्रु हैं. Because आपके अंदर से आता है. Second, he says protect the resources that enable you to do business. Air, water, ये ESG से पहले हाँ. Air, water, people, respect it. The soil. Third thing, he says serve other people before serving yourself. And the fourth thing is take firm decisions but implement them with compassion. Now, you are going to have startups do these 4 things. It's Vedantic. It's been coming for 4,000 years. So, I like the approach that I.I.M.U.N takes. One of the reasons I try to agree to your request to come is the principles are very easy. The implementation is tough. And what you have to remember is it's very easy for me to come and tell you. You'll also go away saying, "हाँ कुछ अच्छा बताया उसने," but then you'll forget it after 1 week. But try to practice some of these, those that you can remember, and it's very helpful in them.
Other thing which I've noticed as a common trait between those who we are projecting as role models and those who come and speak is that they tend to learn from their failures as much as they learn from their success. In fact, most learn more from their failures and are humble enough in order to say this. Sir, in your career, there was the case of the missing $1 million at Unilever. You say that you've learned a lot from this and it's impacted you greatly. Could you share with us that anecdote and what is it that you picked from that and how that's shaped your life?
I will focus on the actual, not the detail, but the episode and the dilemma, human dilemma, because that's what's of value to you. You can't imagine how the world was back in the 80s. I don't blame you. But back in the 80s, everything was under government control. And foreign exchange was very short. I became the director of exports at a fairly young age of 40 or 41. And I don't mind admitting now, I was a bit arrogant. हो जाता है. At 40, 41, you become a director of Hindustan Lever. लोग बोलते हैं. My grandmother was very proud of me. That makes me even more arrogant. And then I found that in the transactions of the company, $1 million was missing. Or my chief financial officer pointed it out to me. Now, $1 million of foreign exchange in the 80s meant you would go to jail. Not only you, your managing director, your chairman, everybody. And you'll be spread over the newspapers for a long time. तो मुझे समस्या आ गई थी कि it's obviously happened under my watch. I am the leader of the export division. $1 million missing is a fair amount of money. What should I do? This dilemma everybody gets. मैंने ये गलती किया है लेकिन क्या करूँ? First thought in my mind was, यार अभी चुप रहो. ये अपने आप solve हो जाएगा. You look at the public space, many people say, यार ये भूत चला जाएगा. But such boots don't go away easily. So मुझे लगा कि बाद में भूत really भूत हो गया तो हम क्या करेंगे? My second choice was put an investigation team to find out what happened. I said, वो करेंगे, जांच करेंगे, it will take them 2-3 months. By that time, हवा पूरा, it will go all over the place to say that there's $1 million missing. And that's not good for my reputation. Kuspus hota rahega. The third choice I had was to go to my boss, who was the managing director and chairman of the company, and say, boss, I need help. Now, very few people in the business world, probably in any world, but I will keep my comment to the business world, are willing to admit their faults, especially if they have risen quite well. When I went to my chairman, he said, "You're looking very perturbed." I said, "Yes, I've never felt lost. But I can't find $1 million. I need help. Because there's law, foreign exchange, Reserve Bank, accounting, which were not my subjects. See, nobody's an island. You can't do everything by yourself. You happen to be the boss." Now, what happened to me was very dramatic. First, it taught me the lesson that when you made a mistake, admit it and seek help. A big mistake, huh? I'm not talking about every little mistake. Is a good option to consider. It may or may not be valid in your situation. That's for you to decide. The second lesson I learned was, many of us put together are smarter than any one of us. Because he was the managing director, he could pick up the phone. 5 people arrived in the room. One is the expert in foreign exchange, one expert in Reserve Bank regulations. And he said, "You must help him." Because जिसने help मांगा है ना, उसको help कोई deny नहीं करता है. It's only when you think that you know everything that people will say, "दिखाए me." So it's good to ask for help. All of them helped me. And because we never found the $1 million, somebody had swindled us. But at the end of 2 years, they rightly or wrongly promoted me, which I was never budgeting for. I had never planned for it. You know, people say promotion. And I think about it, and that's why you have probably raised this question, and I share it with people, because you're going to make mistakes. Some of them will be big mistakes. But admitting a mistake and joining with other people to correct it is not an option you should rule out. In the public space, if that was done, of course, there's lots of politics and so on, so I cannot get into that debate. But in other public life, in companies, I think it will be, at least for me, it was a good experience. We will all make mistakes, however clever you are. And trying to amend it quickly, as they say, when you find yourself in a hole, don't dig deeper, you go deeper into the hole. That is the story.
Admitting your mistakes and admitting that you're wrong is perhaps one of the greatest difficulties for anybody who's 13, 30 or 90. I think that is what I've observed and seen, that whenever we are wrong, whenever somebody says that you're wrong, the first reaction is to defend ourselves and say that no, what we're doing is, what we are doing is right. And this is across all domains, like you rightly said. So you have written about 18 books, and in 19 books now. And these 19 books, one of the things that I have picked up from one of the books is the phrase that you've used, which is the ability to think in English and to act Indian. One of the things that the organization also tries to do is try to project Indianness without forgetting that we are in one world. Can you tell us a little more about this USP? How can young people in their schools implement this USP, if at all?
Actually, you don't have to think about it. It is there. It will happen automatically. But let me explain a little bit of we came to this conclusion, my co-author and myself, because we observed that many people of Indian origin, and I'm defining a person of Indian origin as a person who has spent the first 50, 20 years in India, studying in school, like you people, and then goes abroad, which some of you might. And then over the next 30 years, becomes the CEO of that company. So you see Microsoft, you see Google, people will rattle off 20, 25 companies' names which have Indian who were born, raised in India, and then who went there. And the question, you go to the B schools of the United States, at least 15 deans are of Indian origin. When I use the word Indian origin, I'm not saying their great-grandfather was an Indian, like Rishi Sunak, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking of people who really spent their childhood, were born and raised here. And the question arose in the mind of myself and my co-author, कि ये क्या हो रहा है? इतने स्मार्ट लोग वहाँ जाके CEO बन जाते, यहाँ बैठ के कुछ आगे बढ़ाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, नहीं हो रहा है. What is this uljan? And we came to a number of conclusions, all of which I'm not going to go into. But one of them was the environment in which Indian children grow up. Firstly, almost every child in India is multilingual. If you're living in Bombay, you probably speak Marathi at home, Gujarati with the Modi at the shop, probably Hindi, and almost certainly English in your school or college. Some English. It may not be King's English or Shakespeare's English, but that doesn't matter. I myself speak Bengali, born and raised Bengal. I speak Tamil at home. I learned Sanskrit. Between my wife and myself, we speak 10 languages. Because she was born, she speaks Telugu and so on and so forth. Being multilingual makes you very adaptable. The second thing that makes Indian children adaptable, all of you think of your own domestic situation. You're unlikely to have a room to yourself. Is it working? Yeah. You're unlikely to be having a room to yourself, and if you do have one, when uncle or auntie or papa's friends come, you'll get out of your room, you'll sleep in the hall. Correct? How many of you have not had that experience? He's putting his hand right up, yeah. So be adaptable. Hamara kamra, hamara bathroom is hum logon ka. So when I remember when I was a kid, suddenly I'll be told, firstly I was sharing the room with two of my brothers, so three of us were there. And whenever some uncle came, we would go to the hall. That is another form of adaptability. The third, cuisine. So when I would take my lunch dabba to school, I had an idli or a dosa. The other fellow had an aloo paratha or a thepla. I said, what the hell is that? I never heard of thepla in my life. I'm talking of that time. And then you start to eat other people's foods. Now, the forms of adaptability that you are exposed to, you are not conscious of. I'm telling you all this, you say, yeah, so what's so great about it? But it is that adaptability that is a unique gene. You ask what can our children learn from it? My answer is, be more and more adaptable. Be open to many ideas. There is no single way to do anything. Don't do bad things. You know, there is no chauvinism that Tamil food is better than Gujarati food. You know, if you like it, have it. I love Sindhi curry. I live in Bombay. I like toop. But I don't get that in Calcutta. But when I go to Calcutta, I will get begun bhaja and so on and so forth. So adaptability of language, of space, of cuisine, and many other forms of adaptability that Indians grow up with without being conscious of. And when they go abroad, they find a monolingual, English-speaking, Anglo-Saxon culture. One of the things in India, children learn. All of you have learned this and are continuing to learn it, but you are not conscious of it. You are great problem solvers. Great problem solvers. अरे यार सुबह उठ के कॉलेज पहुंचने के लिए दम घुट जाता है. ट्रेन पकड़ो, टिकट काटो, getting. I remember when kids were born, had to get a birth certificate was a hell of a hassle. I'm sure that by the time I'm dying, my children will have a hell of a problem getting my death certificate. I don't know if it's true, but I'm applying my mind to that. When you go for a death certificate, they ask you for the Aadhaar card of the person. I said, ridiculous. Somebody 90 years old and dead and you're asking for his Aadhaar card. Some of them don't even have an Aadhaar card. So we are all used to solving problems. Getting into a good school, getting into a good college. You're all very privileged people here. You're coming, I can see from your poshak that you're all in good schools and good colleges. But there are lots of kids who don't have that. और हर चीज़ के लिए you have to मेहनत करना पड़ता है. So you create kinetic energy. And वहाँ जाके तो frictional forces बहुत कम है. उड़ जाता है गाड़ी. So I think this is a very valuable thing. Nurture it. Don't crib about it. कि हिंदुस्तान में लाइफ ऐसा है, खराब है. No. Each life offers you an opportunity. And that opportunity is your unique privilege. Your unique privilege. And your ability to think in English. We are having this conversation in English. Right? Any foreigner who comes here, he'll say, yeah, had this been some other country, it will be in Bahasa or Chinese. If I speak to you in Hindi or Marathi, if I could, some of you may not understand it so well, or I might be so good at explaining it. So, English familiarity gives your, if I use the metaphor of a motor car, gives you a flourish. You sitting in a Jaguar, अंग्रेजी बोलते हैं. Indian children are encouraged कि अंग्रेजी सीखो तुम आगे बढ़ सकोगे. Forget about the political brouhaha that goes on, that's not our subject today. So you know English, you're highly adaptable, you're multilingual, जहाँ जाके वहाँ adjust कर लेते हो. यार तो पंजाबी से और की चाहे.
English is the lingua franca of the world, and India, of course, has a distinct advantage because English is something that is taught across. But like you said, the political brouhaha around English and around language, of course, it's imperative that one learns local language and one converses in local language. Like you said, between your wife and you, sir, there are 10 languages that you speak. But considering today is the 19th of April, they are not eligible to vote. But they will at some point in time go and vote. This is a bouncer, this is outside syllabus again, but it's outside the context of the conversation. But 2047 is going to be a time that they are going to see either a Viksit Bharat, or in my case, when I was in 2002, I read a headline. It was called the India Shining campaign, and it was where 20 years from now we are going to have a developed nation. It's been more than 20 years after that, and we yet don't have a developed country. Whether it becomes a developed country or not is in perhaps the hands of the politicians. But what is your idea of India that you would like to see in 2047 that they should build and bring about?
I don't want to take 2047 too literally, because that's the politicians' prerogative. Oh, kuch bolenge. I don't believe everything politicians say, neither should you. वो अपने काम करने के लिए बोल देते हैं कुछ. This is not a reflection on anybody, but he has to get his job done, so he has to get elected. But if I look at the next, you people must be 18, 20, the age group here, even younger. So you'll be around. 50 years from now, I won't be around. But when you're my age, you will, hopefully, I want you to think that एक दिन गए थे वो भाई भी जवान में, एक बुढ़ा आदमी बैठ के मोहन बोला, we will be a developed nation. Far more developed than today. Whether we be like Sweden or, I don't know. The fact of the matter is this. This is a Kala Chakra. You may take credit for it. I'm BJP, I'm Congress, I'm somebody else. That's a separate side show. If you go back to approximately 1800, let's say, a round number, we were the developed nation. We accounted for as big a part of the world's wealth. We and China were over 50%. This is well known. I hope to young people, I want you to know that जो अमानत आपने खोया है, वो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता आपके पास वापस आ. Through all the twists and turns of history, politics, it's coming back to you gradually. So I may take the credit for it. And okay, success has many fathers, failure has no mother. That's a part of life. But the fact of the matter is that gradually, the wheel is turning. I remember the first time I went to the US, and I went to Disney World in Florida, or I went to Airspace Center. I'm talking of the 80s. And I saw the technological advancement there. I can tell you at an adult age, I've rarely wept. I wept. कि मेरे होते ये हमारे देश में आएगा कि नहीं. Today, my grandchildren can do it. They are able to see all this even in India. Perhaps not of the same type, but we are heading there. Not only that, we are doing things that other people are surprised by. A NASA Director General came to meet, you had an ISRO chairman here some time back? He's the first speaker. We sent Chandrayaan, I think for $700 billion or something like that, certain number. And US spends 6 times that amount. to do the same project. I don't know if you mentioned that. He did?
No, he didn't. He didn't.
So the US people said, अरे यार ये एक तो एक चांद भेज दिया, तो इतने सस्ते कैसे किया? And he came and said, Mr. ISRO chairman, congratulations that you sent your rocket to the moon. How do you do it so cheap for 700? And he looked at him and he said, I cannot answer that question, but I want to know how you spent $4 billion to do the same thing. So we have a frugal mindset of innovation. We can carry it to an extreme. This frugal mindset, adaptability, and all these things are going to take us in the direction that you have mentioned, whether it's 2047 or 2057, doesn't matter. It's your lifetime, for sure. And I'll be dead and gone, and many of us older people here, but please remember this. ये आपके generation का एक ये हक नहीं है, एक honor है, that you're restoring back what India was 152 years ago. When I was born, 2 years later, India, not because of me, but coincidentally, it so happened. And our generation, my father's generation grew up fighting for independence. My generation grew up in a poor, independent India. My children's generation grew up in a reforming, more wealthy India. You're growing up in an India which is aspirational. इस एस्पिरेशन को साकार करके आपके ग्रैंड चिल्ड्रन को एक I mean, we are a fantastic opportunity and you're sitting at the cusp of it. Lucky you. I wish I was 17.
The wisdom that you've passed on is what will make the country a developed country, I hope. And the idea that you spoke about, which is that we're sitting on the cusp of history and we're hopefully going to go back to the glorious past, rewrite a lot of things, will only happen when we have people who essentially, and this is my firm belief, that we have people who are in all positions of power, who do little for themselves and more for society. You know Sanskrit, sir, definitely better than me, and which is why, but there's a Sanskrit shloka which basically says, Swasmai Swarupam Samajya Sarvaswam, which basically translates into do little for yourself and do a lot for society. There are very few people who do that, but we are very lucky and very blessed to be surrounded by very many of those. Today, we have the opportunity of hosting one such other individual. On behalf of everybody at I.I.M.U.N, thank you very much, sir, for spending time.